Hi, I'm Ian.
And I'm Jason.
And this is Ghosts and Bears, the only podcast where we bring you the actual ghost stories
With the actual history.
in the actual place. On this episode, we're heading down south to Colorado, where we're going to join one of our patrons and learn all about his stories from Fort Collins, Colorado, including the Stanley Hotel. Coming up on Ghosts and Bears. Well, welcome, friends. We are down one member of the team today. Jason's not feeling very well, and it is Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada, and we went up to Port Alice to spend some time up there. We had a couple of friends join us. It was a lot of fun. And then we came home, and I went, oh, we have an episode due, like, tomorrow night. And we looked a bit panicked at each other. And as I said, Jason, it's a 5-hour drive. Jason drove the whole way, and he's kind of done. So I said, do you just want me to do this one on my own? And he goes, would you mind? And I said, no, not at all. And you will understand when I tell you what we were doing last weekend. We couldn't really talk about this. We have alluded to the fact that we're going to be doing a TV show, but this is a little bit different. This was not our TV show. This is a TV show called The Other Side, and it's on the EP20 network, which is the Aboriginal Programming Television Network here in Canada. The show is in its 9th season. That's what we were filming, was season 9, and it has been sold to 11 countries around the world. So when I got the email asking if we would be on the show as sort of the guests for this particular location, the Yates Building, which if you are a fan of this podcast, you've heard about, I said, yeah, of course. So we got to go on the show. It wasn't quite what we expected. It wasn't quite what either of us expected. It was, honestly, especially for Jason, it was life-changing. And we're going to include that. We talked about this, about how, we wanted to share this experience because it is a doozy. And of course you get to know because you're part of the community here. So we're going to share that on the Halloween episode along with the listener stories because it is profound. I have to say it was a profound moment for Jay. And I think you're going to feel the same way. It was startling. It was startling for me, and it was life-changing for Jason. So we're going to talk about that and focus on that and see what we can put together for the 27th, which will be the Halloween episode. And then this episode, we had a great time talking to Brooks Fisher, who you will hear a little more about in the intro. But Brooks was one of the first people who reached out to me. I've had about 3 or 4 people say, hey, I'd be interested in that. When I said we had, kind of painted ourselves into a corner in terms of going to every place we're going to talk about, I realized that's not really the whole thing of the show. What people enjoy is the history and that sort of personal connection. Even if it's not us as the person, it's that personal connection to whatever history is there. And so Brooks was one of the first people. He loves where he lives in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he really, really, really wanted to tell us about some of the stories. And so I sat down with Brooks and we had a call, and he was great. He gave me some great stories of his own personal encounters, not only in the Stanley Hotel, but also in his house growing up and as well as his apartment. So pretty cool stuff. I think you will really enjoy it. Other than that, we've just been, doing, the shooting of the TV show was a lot of work. It was 1 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Friday, 1 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Saturday, and then 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. And it was intense. And so we were pretty tired. And then we worked this week, of course. And then we headed up for the long weekend for a time away up in Port Alice. And now we're back, and I got a turkey cooking, got a couple of friends coming over, so we're going to do that as well because I'm insane. And I thought, oh yeah, and we got to record a podcast. So that's what we're doing. And that's where you are right now with me. We're going to jump in right away into kind of the history of the places we're talking about. First thing is Fort Collins, Colorado. It was a military outpost in 1864, found in Colorado. It was Camp Collins originally, and it was put up during the Aboriginal Wars in the 1860s, basically to protect the mail route. That was the plan. But they decided they were going to start settling and settling the vicinity of the fort, and that's what they did. 1867, the fort was decommissioned. The original fort site is now called Old Town, and it's a place you can go and hang out and do some touristy things. So that's pretty cool. And then we've also got a larger part of the city. They saw a lot of construction in the 1880s where, it got kind of fancy houses because that's what people do. And those were made with stone quarrying and that kind of thing. And then things got bigger and bigger. Fort Collins gained a reputation as a very conservative city in the 20th century. They had a prohibition was in place for alcoholic beverages. And this was a big deal in the town in the early decades. And then they kind of eventually, it was there from 1890 to 1969. They had prohibition in this town. So pretty conservative town. But now it's kind of a cool, I don't know how to describe it. It seems to me it's a bit like a in Texas where they have Austin, and Austin's kind of different than Texas. It's that kind of thing. It's kind of a funky, cool university town, brew pubs, that kind of thing. So that's pretty cool. They have had some issues with flooding, as you usually do when you build a town near a river. I think we all can understand that. But all in all, it's just a great place to live. It's the fourth largest city in Colorado. And it's good. It's a good place to be. So definitely an interesting place. It has a great arts and culture focus, and lots of really neat things going on. So you definitely are going to want to check that out. I know that with all the traveling stuff Jason and I do, we are really looking forward to going and checking out Fort Collins. So we will be, I guarantee it. That is someplace we will absolutely be going. So that's Fort Collins for you. Some of the places that we were talking about, or I was talking about with Brooks, the Stanley Hotel. Now this hotel, and this hotel needs no introduction. It's a 140 room colonial revival hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. It's about 5 miles from the entrance to the Rocky Mountain National Park, and it was built by Freeland Oscar Stanley. He had money. He was a co-founder of the Stanley Motor Carriage Company, so he had some bucks. And it opened July 4th, 1909, as a resort for upper-class Easterners and a health retreat for sufferers of pulmonary tuberculosis. And Brooks touched on this a bit when he was telling us about the history of the hotel as well in our conversation. The hotel and its surrounding structures are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and there is a hotel, a restaurant, a spa, a bed and breakfast, and all, of course, with panoramic views of Lake Estes, the Rockies, and Longs Peak. As you know, I hope you know, if you're a fan of anything horror-ish, the Stanley Hotel inspired the Overlook Hotel in Stephen King's 1977 best-selling novel, The Shining, and of course, the film. It was also the filming location for the related 1997 TV miniseries. I don't know about you, but those Stephen King miniseries, they never seem to do very well. Not that they don't do well, they're just not very good. Personal opinion, go ahead. Yell at me. In 1903, the steam-powered car inventor Freeland Oscar Stanley was stricken with a life-threatening resurgence of tuberculosis, which, as you know, was pretty common back then. The most highly recommended treatment of the day was fresh, dry air with much sunlight and a hearty diet. Therefore, like many lungers of his day, Stanley resolved to take the curative air of the Rocky Mountains. It was kind of either you went there or you went to the desert. There were sort of two schools of thinking. But over the season, Stanley's health improved dramatically. Impressed by the beauty of the valley and grateful for his recovery, he decided to return every year. He actually lived to 91 and died of a heart attack 1 year after his wife in 1940. By 1907, he'd recovered completely, but not content with the rustic accommodations, lazy pastimes, and relaxed social scene of their new summer home. I guess, relaxed social scene, like people are showing up in shorts. I don't know. Stanley resolved to turn Estes Park into a resort town. In 1907, construction began, and the 48-room Grand Hotel that catered to the class of moderately wealthy urbanites who composed the Stanley social circle back east, as well as the consumptive seeking the healthful climate. Basically, he built a big clubhouse for his rich friends. That's what I'm hearing here. That's kind of what he did. It went through a few things. The main hotel and concert hall were completed in 1909, the manor in 1910. They even put in a car company he had his car company produce a special fleet of specially designed steam-powered vehicles called mountain wagons that seated multiple passengers. He operated the hotel almost like a hobby. It was kind of a fun thing for him. He spent way more money on it than he made each summer. In 1926, he sold the hotel to a private company, incorporated for the sole purpose of running it. It failed. I mean, big surprise with the business model of we're spending way more than we're making. It failed, and in 1929, Stanley purchased his property out of foreclosure, selling it again in 1930 to fellow automobile and hotel magnate Roe Emery of Denver. Until 1983, the resort was only open during the summer, shutting down for the winter every year. This is pretty common. I think if you heard the Banff episode, the Banff Springs Hotel shut down every winter until 1968, I believe, before they could put in central heating. The presence of the hotel and Stanley's own involvement greatly contributed to the growth of Estes Park and the creation of the Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, there were some rough goings for the hotel at times. 1911, there was a gas explosion, alleged to be, the hotel was pretty much primarily electrical, which was very unusual. But it did have an auxiliary gas lighting system. The day after the pipes filled, on June 25th, 1911, the explosion occurred that injured a maid and damaged the structure. However, no one died, so that was pretty important. Both ankles were broken on one hotel employee, though, which would be distressing. So that's the Stanley Hotel. We're also talking about another spot he talked about was a place called Strauss's Cabin. And there's it's kind of one of those local places where people get very excited to go and check it out. It's not there anymore, unfortunately. Now, what I can tell you about that is there was a tall cottonwood tree that stood along the banks of the river, and the trunk was 16 feet around. The Arapaho, who were the First Nations band who frequented the area, adopted this as their council tree, meaning that they gathered there to camp, confer, and have their meetings. The tree was on land near Timnath, which had been homesteaded by Robert Strauss in 1860. Strauss was on friendly terms with these Native Americans and had no problem with the itinerant campers. Chief Friday was a peaceable man, and Strauss was mainly interested in farming his land. The two often spoke together because Friday was fluent in English, so that's pretty cool. An easygoing kind of relationship. Though the Arapaho were placid towards the white men who were invading their territory, they did on occasion quarrel with other tribes. Once a rival tribe member was hanged from the tree, but for the most part, the tribes got along, enjoying the abundant fish in the river. This tree also sheltered the Arapaho dead. And now, as you know, this is something that they did here in Victoria as well, the sky burial. Their bodies wrapped in buffalo hides, they slept their eternal sleep, held fast to the branches by pieces of bright cloth. The branches gradually got gnarled and bent from the weight of the bodies. The proud chief camped near the council tree in spite of treaty negotiated in 1861, which severely limited the range of his tribe. He was limited to the southeastern part of the Colorado Territory. Eventually, in 1863, he was forced to agree to the treaty and accept the limitations, and Friday ended up dying at the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. In 1904, Strauss, bless him, did not have a great end. Strauss died when the river overflowed and inundated his land. Old and tired, he clung to the fence all night, feebly calling for help, but by the time help came, it was too late. Since Strauss had never married and had no heirs, in time other farmers came to work the land. In 1938, one of them let a weed-burning fire get out of control. The tree, the famous tree, was so badly scorched that it could not survive, and a few years later, it was struck by lightning. The stump left behind was removed. As a consequence, no one's really sure where the old tree stood. Making their best guesses, historians determined the tree was east of Interstate 25 and north of Horsetooth Road near the Colorado State University Environmental Learning Center. Decades ago, the Daughters of the American Revolution put a plaque on the spot, but it too can no longer be found. Despite the 1904 flood and subsequent others, the log cabin George Strauss had built stood for more than a century, until 1999, when some teenagers, intrigued by stories of hauntings in the area, burned it down, consigning it and the tree to history. That information all came from an author named Barbara Fleming, and she has written several books of local history. So, yeah, Strauss's cabin did not work out so hot. There's another place, the old Armadillo is somewhere that Brooks talked about, and this is from the old town section of town. It was known as the Armadillo's Garage. For a long time, it was the old Armadillo was the restaurant that was there, but it was also one of Fort Collins's biggest haunts. There's an interesting story there. Back in the 1800s, an older man, James H. Howe, murdered his young wife, Eva, by slitting her throat with a pocket knife, as you do. He did this, as I said, April 5th, 1888. Even James Howe were a well-off couple, especially with James employed as a millwright. He was one of the best mechanics in the area and was never out of work. James, however, was a frequent consumer of alcohol. You can see maybe why there was such a strong prohibition bent in old Fort Collins. Every time he would drink, he would become violent towards Eva. After a heavy beating one night, she went to the police requesting assistance, but also requested they did not arrest her husband. That seemed to be it, until the following day when she realized that it was just too dangerous to stay with him in any capacity, and she began making plans to leave. She went to a friend's house to store her items and left her baby daughter there as well, and later that evening when she returned to her house alone to finish her packing. According to the paper, James had decided to go out drinking that night, and when he came back, he found Eva preparing to leave him. This is not going to end well. James was filled with anger, and the two fought towards the front door until they both stumbled out into the front yard. James apparently slashed her twice on the face before she keeled over on hands and knees, and he reached over her, plunging his pocket knife into her throat. Eva stumbled out towards Linden Street and screamed "murder" before falling over and eventually bleeding to death. James ran inside and was found on their bed covered in blood when he tried to convince townspeople that she had attempted to kill him first. Oh, very manly of you, James. James was carted off to the local jail after the police finally got a hold of him, and that night, before his subsequent trial that was slated for later that week, all the lights in Fort Collins were cut. Angry townspeople stormed the jail and broke James out with a metal chisel. Then, amidst his cries for mercy, they took him outside and hung him from a derrick nearby. According to Aaron Udall's report in the Coloradoan on the story, this is cited as Larimer County's first and only lynching. The creepy carriage house no longer stands, and the exact house where Eva Howe was murdered by her husband has been moved to Walnut Street. Fort Collins has had its share of violent and odd histories, which is what makes it such an interesting town. So the carriage is gone, but there are still stories about the Armadillo, and thankfully we have Brooks to share those with us. There was also one other place he talked about, the Walrus ice cream shop. Walrus ice cream is said to be one of the many Fort Collins ghosts who still hang out. Charlie Dinneback showed up in 1902, and he's still hanging around. Riding off the success of their barbershop, cafe, and boarding house, so, they were a conglomerate here, the Dinneback family opened up Dinneback Cafe. Charlie Dinneback put his all into this new venture. He actively made himself available at the cafe, delving out quality hospitality, which he'd become known for. As a prominent member of the community, Dinneback would often throw soirees in the basement of the building. Interesting. I wonder what kind of soirees. A tunnel that leads to a neighboring building suggests there might have even been a speakeasy below. Oh, you think? People seldom have parties for people in the basement if they're not, up to something. Dinneback attended to the cafe until his death in 1940. Flash forward to 1984, and the building had moved on to its next reincarnation, an ice cream store called Walrus Ice Cream, boasting 29 flavors, which change day to day. Okay, so I have another place I'm going to be stopping by at when I go to Fort Collins. Walrus quickly became a town favorite, but soon the owners and employees started sensing they were not alone. Falling objects, electric shocks, and changing clocks. It all added up to a ghostly visitor in the shop, and with a reputation for constantly watching over his cafe, it wasn't a far stretch to wonder if Dennebeck stuck around to ensure his building would continue to run in tip-top shape. Lisa Powell, a current owner of the shop, described a series of volatile encounters with Dennebeck when she started to renovate the space. She said the front window was broken, and the dipping cabinet would be found knocked over. But once they put up a commemoration of Dennebeck on the wall, everything calmed down. She's never seen him personally, but says that she feels his presence often. One employee described an event that happened on a slow day in the shop. The clock, it didn't just fall, it literally flew off, he said. Powell added that the clock would never tell the right time, even with fresh batteries. She told another story about how a sticker dating a photo on the wall to 1919 would constantly fall off. After some research, it was found the photo was actually from 1920. The corrected sticker hasn't had any issues staying on. Don't let Walrus's Ice Cream's ghostly inhabitants scare you off. Powell claims that Dennebeck is a friendly ghost. He's simply sticking around to assure his legacy of great customer service lives on in the building he spent so much of his waking life in. And spooky past aside, Walrus Ice Cream serves up a mean cone. I bet it does. I'm so going there. So we have a smorgasbord of delightful stories from Brooks, and I'm really grateful he took the time to talk to me. His audio wasn't super awesome. I'm using a system that I'm still working out, but it is understandable, and I am very grateful to him for speaking with us. If you would like to do this, and I'm talking to you, my friend in Salt Lake City, who I'm not calling out, but I totally am right now, please send me an email and let's set up a time to do this. It's really not that hard. It'll be like 30 minutes out of your life, and it's great because it gets us to kind of virtually go to that location, and I love it. I mean, I knew nothing about Fort Collins before this, and now I feel like I could go there and have a really good time and see some cool spooky stuff. So, you know, it all works. We are going to move on into that phase, and when I am back, I have a few extra stories from the Stanley Hotel. But until then, enjoy the story time. All right. Well, here we are with Brooks Fisher. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
I am good. It's a fine day in October, and Brooks is actually not only a listener of the show, he's also a patron, and he's also one of our, I think you may be the first person who is going to be our guest with this whole new concept we're doing, where we're doing the actual ghost story with the actual history from the actual place. And Brooks, why don't you tell us where you are right now?
I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is in northern Colorado, about an hour and a half north of Denver, right on the border of Wyoming.
Nice. Both beautiful states. And you have, we're going to talk a little bit about the Stanley Hotel, which of course was the inspiration for the famous Stephen King book. And what can you tell me about your experience? I mean, we're going to talk about other stuff too in Fort Collins, but we're going to focus on the Stanley off the bat, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right. So tell me about the Stanley. What were you doing there? What was going on? What all happened? I'll just let you go.
So I love the Stanley Hotel. I've been there a lot. Actually, I was just there today. Got the day off and drove up there because I wanted to.
Nice.
And the history is cool. The energy there is cool. All of it I love. I've been lucky enough to have a handful of ghost experiences in the past with it as well.
Right.
Both by staying the night there and just hanging out there on like the tour and stuff.
Very cool. And so tell me about, what was your first sort of experience there of the ghostly nature?
My first experience was in 2018 when me and my ex went up there and we were doing the night ghost tour.
Right.
And at the end of the tour, they take you in the basement and I'm telling you about the basement and the tunnels of the Stanley and all that. And there's a barrel down there that was like owned by a chef at one point, and the chef is still very protective of that barrel.
Okay.
And at one point during the ghost tour, like they turn off the lights and you can take pictures in complete darkness. And sometimes people get stuff that show up or not. And this guy was standing next to the barrel, and at the time, the barrel was right near the wall. So it was like him, the wall, and the barrel. And lights go off, you hear a thud sound. And so the tour guy turns back on the lights, and this guy's on the ground, like his nose is bleeding, he's cut up. And
What?
And they had to call the EMTs, and we had to walk by him. And we're walking by him, and him just telling the EMTs, I don't know if I was shoved from behind.
Wow. And he just basically did a face plant.
Yes.
Because assumedly he was too close to the barrel?
Assuming so. Who knows what happened, but
wow.
He was shoved from behind when there was a wall behind him.
I mean, you'd have to be pretty darn committed to a hoax to give yourself a bloody nose and have the EMTs called.
Yes. That's an expensive hoax.
That is a very expensive hoax. Oh my goodness. Wow, that's crazy. And what else? I know you had mentioned some other things. What else has gone on there for you?
Yeah, I just saw my ex a couple days ago. I bumped into her in person, and I remember seeing her in person the same night we were on a tour. I was taking pictures on my phone, and my phone just completely shut off, which was weird. It was like at 80%
Right.
And when my ex were leaving the grounds of the Stanley, it just turns back on by itself.
Oh, wow. That is weird. I've actually had an experience like that. I have a Square device for when I'm doing ghost walks so people can buy books or whatever. And I had just recharged it. And usually that means it's good for about a month. And I just recharged it. And we got to the end of the ghost tour where we're at our most haunted building, definitely. And I took it out and I put it down on the windowsill of this building to get a book out or a pen or whatever. And I picked it back up again and it just flashed orange at me, meaning it was done. It was dead. The batteries had been absolutely drained. So I have no explanation for that either. So I totally get that. It's weird the phone came on all by itself. It's like, it's not like the batteries died. It's almost as if something went, no, you're done now.
Yeah. And it had the same amount of battery level. It was like at 80% when it turned back on when we left the grounds of the Stanley.
That is so crazy. Wow. What else happened? I think you'd mentioned something about staying overnight or something like that.
Yes, me and my current girlfriend stayed over the night in October of 2020. And we first did the daytime history tour. And during the daytime history tour, at some point we were listening to the tour guide. And I was in my own little world enjoying it. And I felt like someone was rubbing the back of my neck.
Right.
It was a really soft and feminine touch. So I looked at my girlfriend thinking it's her. And it's not her. Her hands are in her pockets.
Uh-oh.
And I look up, is like in an air vent or something? Not an air vent. Then I'm thinking, is the woman next to me just confused? Like, I look over there and she's not touching me. And I just cannot figure out like who was rubbing the back of my neck.
That is so weird. And did you get an explanation for that?
Yeah, later I was talking to all my friends about it. And I'm telling them the story. And it was like, oh, that's Flora Stanley. That's the owner's wife. And I'm like, Joel, What are you talking about? He goes, it's a thing where people will experience being touched by her, and it's a very soft thing, like you just talked about.
Whoa, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, nice. I mean, that's very nice that she's sweet, but still really creepy.
Yeah, creepy and weird, but it was still cool to be in the moment and experience that.
Absolutely. I mean, when you have that kind of event happen in the moment, that's pretty wild. Anything else going on there for you?
Yeah, the same day, later that night, me and my girlfriend were laying in bed. It was around like midnight, and the town of Estes is a small tourist town, so everything shuts down around 8 or 9 p.m. And we just hear these heavy footsteps go like from our door across our room, and they're heavy boot prints almost. And
like over your room or like through your room?
Through our room. We were on the top floor. It couldn't be above us.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we were on the top floor. And my girlfriend kind of perks up. She goes, "Did you hear that? Like the footsteps in her room?" Yeah, I did hear it.
Oh boy! And was that it just the once, or was it kind of a thing that bugged you all night?
So no more footprints after that. But when you're 7,000 feet and in October, you're blasting the heat at night because it's freezing.
Of course, yeah.
So we wake up and the AC is just blasting, and me and my girlfriend both pointing a finger at each other, saying, "Hey, why'd you do that?" And neither of us did it, but the weird thing was the boot prints walked from our door to the AC unit in our room.
Oh my goodness. So it's almost like something came in, turned on the AC, and then left you
Yeah.
freezing in a room.
Yes.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it was very bizarre.
Was there anything else you had happen at the Stanley?
Me personally, no, but there are other good stories from the Stanley.
Right.
Yeah, like
Wow. No, please, sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, like there are plenty of cool stories from the Stanley, from celebrities like Jim Carrey who stayed there to other just normal recurring occurrences as well.
And I've heard some other stories from the Stanley. Like people have had some serious experiences there. I remember a long time ago, one of the listeners had sent in a story about going there, and they were up on the top floor, and they climbed into bed. And when they woke up in the morning, they were both tucked in so tightly by something that they actually had to fight their way out of the bed. And that was the nursery, wasn't it? Like people would come to the hotel and be like, "Okay, kids." Go up to the nursery. We're here to have a good time.
Yeah, the fourth floor was the nursery where the children really stayed, and that's also known as the most haunted floor as well.
Oh, wow. And do they know who it's like most haunted by?
There are children laughing up there, so you can hear some children. There's a cowboy who has one room where he'll like to watch women sleep, and every now and then kiss them on the forehead.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, pretty creepy to be in that room.
I wonder, like, where the kids came from. I wonder if it's because there's people who just had the best memories from the hotel, and so when they passed on, they went back there, or are they people who maybe I don't know, kids got sick or fell down a mountain or something, and that's just sort of where they were at the time. It'd be interesting to know about the history about that.
Yeah, that would be cool. I don't know why there are so many children and children hanging out there after death, but there are certainly a lot of them.
Did the owner have kids there? Like, was that,
to my knowledge, no. He moved up there in his late 60s after his third bout with tuberculosis. So I'm guessing he had no kids up there.
Yeah, no, he wasn't super in shape for procreating.
No. He was basically sent up there to die and then survived.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, that was kind of the one cure for tuberculosis. It was either the fresh, clean mountain air or the fresh, clean prairie air. That was sort of where the most popular TB sanitariums were found, because people actually did recover comparatively if they stayed in the cities.
Yes, yeah. So he was living in Maine, then he got sent to Denver. And at the time, Denver was a big mining city, so super polluted.
Right.
And the doctor's like, he got less than 6 months to live. Cabin residence here in my keys. And he went up there expecting a dead body, and he was staying there doing fine. He was hiking and hunting and fishing and canoeing, and was getting late and was all cured.
That's amazing. That is so cool. Okay, so Stanley Hotel, but you currently live in Fort Collins, correct?
Correct, I do.
And Fort Collins, what's there? Why do people live there? Is it's like a military town? Is it what's going on there?
There's a campus here, Colorado State University, so it's a big college city, but it's also a big city to move to. We're growing like crazy. We're always in the top 5 or 10 cities to move to. There's a lot of local beer here, and just lots of hiking and fishing and a lot of other stuff.
Cool. So it's really kind of like an outdoorsy, kind of funky place to live if you're able to live there.
Yeah, outdoorsy mountain hipsters.
That's awesome. That's very cool. And you had mentioned you lived in a haunted house when you were a kid.
I did. I grew up in one.
So tell me about that. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I grew up in one. That's kind of where my first memories of ghosts came from.
Sure.
One time I was home alone. I was playing video games, and I hear the door from the garage to the house close, and my voice call my name downstairs. And I'm assuming it's my grandpa or dad. So I walk downstairs. I check the kitchen and dining area, no one. I go down the long hallway, no one's in the bathroom, no one's in the dining room, no one's in the living room, no one's in the family room. And then I'm standing at the base of the stairs, and I hear my name called from upstairs. So at this point, I'm like, oh, my dad just lived with me. So I go upstairs, check my room, check the bathroom, check my parents' room, check my parents' bathroom, check their walk-in closet, check the game room, check my sister's room, and still no one. And I'm at the base of the stairs, and I'm getting called from downstairs. And that's kind of where all the hair on my body stood up and goes, this isn't right.
Right. Yeah. At some point, you kind of go, wait a minute.
So I go downstairs, I check all the rooms, and I peek in the garage, and the garage is empty, so no one's home. I'm still home alone. And at that point, I just turn on all the lights on the main floor and just hang in the living room watching TV until someone comes home.
Good plan. Good plan. Yeah, don't isolate. At least you weren't lured into the basement or something and locked down there. Like, that's the absolute definition of pure fear for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, at that point, I did not think about going to the basement. I left that one alone.
No way. When I was a kid, like when I kind of hit 11, 12, my parents built me a bedroom in the basement, but they didn't do the entire basement. They just built like literally a box room in the corner of the basement. So I had to cross through an undeveloped portion to get there with a lot of open, spaces and things like that. And it was like, I remember thinking like it was my gauntlet of fear to go from my bedroom to the stairs. I have never in my whole life moved as fast as going from my bedroom to the stairs. And I would go up those stairs like 3 at a time. Like it was, I was out of there.
Sounds terrible. I don't want a room like that.
Absolutely. So basements have a special place in my heart of absolute terror. Anything else happened in the house when you were there?
There was one point where me and my friend were playing hide and seek, and I was hiding in our downstairs bathroom, and he found me, and we had the game closet full of board games in there.
Right.
And for some reason, that door was partially open. I'm looking to it, and it's kind of seeing an eyeball hanging out there, and like to this day, I know my friend was still giving crap. Like, remember that one time you saw an eyeball? I was like, haha, yeah, I do. I was so silly.
Yeah.
But I still remember seeing it.
Wow. That is weird. Just an eyeball, like someone's peering through a knothole on a fence or something.
Yeah, something like that. It was super bizarre.
That is bizarre. I've never heard of that before.
And then one more story, which is my favorite story from living in this house.
Yeah, please.
I was up in the same game room as the 2 stories before I heard my name, and there was a power surge. The lights got super bright in the bathroom wall, like in less than a second.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this feeling where someone entered the room. So I looked at the chair next to me, and there's an old man with like a long gray beard and suit. He has his leg crossed, hands folded on his lap, and he's just kind of staring at the TV. And at this point, I kind of do a double take, like, what am I looking at? And he's just gone.
Whoa. And did you recognize him, or he was just some old dude?
Some old dude, never seen before in my life. He didn't even look at me. I don't think he even saw me. He was just kind of focused on the TV, staring at it.
Now, was the TV on at the time? Like, or in his mind it was on?
The TV was on and I was playing video games.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, of course. That's so interesting. And do you know the history of the house at all?
It was built for my grandparents in the 80s.
Okay.
So we were the first ones to live in it, and before I moved, we were the only ones to live in it as well.
Interesting. Do you know what was on the land before?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it was part of something else. A lot of homes around where we live here in Victoria, they are parts of old farms. So you just don't know what was there before. You could be anywhere. I've talked about it before. I think on our Halloween episode last year, we talked about how we're built on the site of an old First Nations village. So you get what you get.
Yeah, that would not be fun. That would be a gamble to live there.
It pretty much is. Pretty much. Now, did anybody else ever experience anything in the house? I mean, you mentioned your friend, but like any of your other family members, did they ever experience anything?
Not to my knowledge, no. And I'm the only one who's into this stuff as well and kind of has experiences.
Right.
So I don't know if they did and just kind of brushed it off, or if they're just closed-minded or not sensitive enough to it.
Yeah. Or they just don't want to talk about it. And I've certainly run into people like that. Now, it's not like you suddenly moved out of that house and never experienced anything again. You moved into an apartment where you had some things going on, right?
Yeah, I moved into a haunted apartment about like half a mile away from that house.
And can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I moved in there, and I actually ordered your book, and it came with a sticker. And I put the sticker on the first page and put it on the nightstand, planning to read it. And I played some video games, put it on pause, go and grab a drink. And I noticed the sticker got moved from inside the first page of the book on the top right hand of my bedside to the bottom left foot of my bed.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you bought a haunted book
Other stuff happened, but that's one of the first things I noticed was the sticker being moved
Right.
from inside the book across the bed, like from top left to bottom right.
Like when you consciously went, oh, okay, something's going on here.
Yeah, I was like, I did not put that there. That was my bookmark, and yeah.
Now, was there anything else that happened in that apartment?
Yeah, there was. So I lived in that apartment for 2 years. 1 year I had roommates, 1 I didn't.
Right.
And like I would wake up with scratches on my chest or my arms, and I'd bite my nails to the nub really bad. So I know I'm not scratching myself in my sleep. There was one night I felt like a hand on my arm, just kind of like resting there, and I grasped my arm and pulled it.
Oh my gosh! It pulled your arm?
Yeah, my hair on my arm.
Oh, well, still unpleasant. Yeah. That's not cool.
I was falling asleep, and I felt like a hand on my arm. And then
do you think they were trying to wake you up?
It woke me up. I jolted awake after that.
Yeah. And were you able to go back to sleep, or was that it?
I got a snack, watched some TV, then just kind of fell back asleep.
Yeah. And that's the usual pattern. I don't know that, like in the movies, something happens and they jump up and run out of the house and never return. But for most of us living in the real world, it's like, okay, that was weird. And then we kind of read or self-soothe in some way and then go back to sleep.
Yeah, you just learn to live with it. I remember my girlfriend came a couple times and spent the night, and she'd hear footsteps or whatever. And she's like, "What's that sound?" Like, it sounds like it's in your apartment. I'm like, it probably is. Yeah, I know. You get used to it. And then noises especially got a lot more active when she was there.
Really? So something was responding to her energy.
Yeah, something was responding to her energy. I think that I had a female ghost living there. I don't know why. That was just my instinct.
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, what about this ghost? And for me, and probably for you as well, because you're sensitive to this stuff, I can actually say like, well, it's an older male, or it's a younger female, or and if you said to me, well, how do you know that? I wouldn't be able to tell you. But when you've kind of experienced that energy for yourself, it seems to just tell you itself without telling you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can get the vibe energy off it.
You do, yeah, for sure. I wonder if it was kind of mad that she was there.
I don't know, maybe. So there was a female ghost that lived there, but I also had an uncle who died last May, and his birthday is August 1st, and then on July 31st, I was making some sausages, and he had his favorite beer to boil the sausages in.
Right.
There's just a little left. They placed it on the counter, still in the bottle, like in honor of him, like a happy birthday, Brian.
Which is really cool.
And then I'm laying in bed. It's around like 2:30 in the morning, and I hear a tapping on my counter, and it's the bottle being tapped against the counter.
No.
Yeah, so I think he came by and just kind of said, hey, thank you.
I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, it was super cool, a little emotional too, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many stories of loved ones coming back and like just reassuring us or letting us know they're okay, or letting you know they still love you, kind of thing. Like, I just think that's amazing. And it's so frustrating when people are like, no, that doesn't happen. Once you've experienced it for yourself, it's like, yeah, no, this is what happens. Like, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I know what the sound of a glass bottle that's being tapped against the counter. Like, I know what that was.
Exactly. Did you have anything else happen in the apartment?
No, just weird sounds and stuff like that. Those are the main things that happened.
You just kind of get used to it after all. Well, not the scratching. I would be not okay with the scratching.
That only happened once or twice.
Okay. And when you left the apartment, was it because it was haunted, or you just wanted out of there?
That's a whole different story I have.
Oh, no.
Because the stands were cracked and it was unsafe to live in, so my apartment complex had moved me to a different one.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a few other places in your email. Is it okay if I ask you about those? Because you said you hadn't had stories, but you'd heard stories from them. One of them was, one was Walrus Ice Cream.
Walrus Ice Cream, yes. That place is a really known haunted location in Fort Collins. And there's just like weird sounds and windows breaking and like phantom footsteps and all sorts of weird things like that. You can go ask employees, and then all have stories about it.
And is that because it's like a really old building and it was used for something else, like an old saloon or something?
Yeah, it used to be. Yeah, so Fort Collins has these tunnels underneath it, and the place next to it was a morgue. So what happened was they would use the entrance of the tunnel, the Walrus Ice Cream, to go to the morgue and hang out below.
Of course.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Do you know why there's tunnels? What was the deal with the tunnels?
I don't know why. There are tunnels I hear, like rumor is they go all the way out to Loveland, which is like 20 miles away from here.
Yeah.
No, there are tunnels. Some people say it's for alcohol running. Some people said it was for stuff like that, to move stuff around. I don't know.
Yeah, during Prohibition was a big tunnel time. They did a lot of that kind of whenever they needed to move something illegal, they were using the tunnels. So that is interesting. Another place you mentioned, Strauss Cabin.
Yeah, Strauss Cabin is really interesting. It's outside city limits of Fort Collins, but super haunted. There was supposedly someone got lynched there, and there's a fire that killed some homeless people. And I tried going a couple times that night, but the police have that place pretty locked up where they almost always are shooing you away. Like, they don't stop you, they just drive behind you till you get away from it.
Oh, right. And is what is it now? Is it like a private home, or it's a public place, or what is it now?
I think it's a public park. I've never been there during the daytime, but the road that leads to it's called Strauss Cabin Road.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and hopefully we'll cover that in the history before we even hear this story, so people will be like, we already know, dummies.
Yeah, it's just a lot of weird screaming there, and like, people following you and eyes on you at night kind of thing.
Nice. Weird screaming. Can't go wrong with that. That's going to freak anybody out.
Yeah, especially when you're on the side of the highway and no one will be screaming there. You should be able to hear cars.
Oh, yikes. The Northern Hotel.
The Northern Hotel, the most famous ghost story from that one is the guy who died in the fire. There's been many times where he's been seen trapped on a ledge outside, and people think he's a jumper. So they used to call 911 all the time, and the police and like fire departments and all come rushing over there to try to save this guy. But now it's to the point where there's probably 8 SWAT cars, 2 cops there just to check it out because I'm so used to getting these phone calls of, hey, someone's on this ledge, but no one's there.
That's crazy. It's interesting you say it because one of the stories I researched for the Calgary's Most Haunted book, which is coming out in a couple of years, they have a story about a bridge and someone screaming for help. And they got so used to having to go to this bridge because of someone screaming for help, because of course someone would call 911, that they just sort of said, don't bother with it, but they still have to kind of go, so they'll send 1 cop car. But what they did was when they replaced the old bridge with the new bridge, they put some super bright lights under there, so now it's easy for a cop to go and look and see if there's anything going on, and if there isn't, they're like, yeah, it's the screaming, and they just go about their night. Like, it's insane how it just sort of becomes this thing that no one really talks about. But everyone just understands, well, this is the way it is.
Yeah, I would love to talk to a cop, especially an older cop who's been in Fort Collins for a while, and get their opinion on it, because like they know the stories behind it. Like, I wonder what they're told.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the last place you'd mentioned was Old Armadillo.
Oh, Old Armadillo, yeah. That used to be a restaurant here that got torn down to as a hotel. And like that was a very famous place. Like, there was a very bloody death there, and like women would go to the bathroom and see this person bleeding out, and like begging for help, and would go out and like say, "Hey, someone's in the bathroom." And employees got so used to it, they'd be like, "Okay, let's go check," and go, and no one's there.
So another one of these where they're like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah, well, they just kind of get used to it, and hear the same thing. And there was a haunted garage attached to the Armadillo that no one would ever go into. Like, even the owner just kind of locked it up and let it be, because there was some stuff that scared them so bad.
Wow. Yeah, I understand that, unfortunately. That's amazing. So it sounds like Fort Collins, I mean, it is an older city for the area, right? It's been there a while.
Yeah, it's been since the late 1800s. It used to be a military camp.
Right. So it's had time to rack up a few of its own ghosts.
Yeah. I think according to Yelp, we're the 3rd most haunted city in America, in the United States, behind New Orleans and Savannah, Georgia.
Wow. That's interesting, because the 2 of the ghost walks I definitely want to do at some point. The 2 on my list, for sure, New Orleans and Savannah. So obviously I need to add Fort Collins to the list, because you may as well do the top 3, right?
Exactly. You do have a ghost walk, and it's very well done. You have a lot of history of the town and the places you go to as well.
Very cool. Well, Jay and I, because we are on the West Coast, we're probably much more likely to go through there first. So when we do, we're going out for beer.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you for sharing all those with me, Brooks. I really appreciate it. And I am looking forward to this episode. And you had mentioned you're going to send some pictures, so I'm excited to see those. And we'll be sharing those with our patrons, of course, in our patron post for the pictures that go with the episode. And thanks for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. Letting me share the stories and history in my place. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it.
No, it's great. It's awesome. And I'm hoping that other people will be inspired by you to do the same. This is amazing that we can do this. And even if we can't get there due to, work and money restrictions, we can still bring the stories from there from a real person who's there, which is so great.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, and I can't wait to hear this episode.
All right. Thank you, Brooks. And we will be heading back to do our wrap-up. Thanks so much. All right, so as promised, I have a couple of stories for you that Brooks sent afterwards. And these were just from people who had been to the hotel. These aren't his, and that's why he didn't talk about them. But he said, I know a couple more if you want them. I said, absolutely. When Jim Carrey was filming Dumb and Dumber, it was shot at the Stanley, and he wanted to stay in the most haunted room, which is said to be room 217. In the middle of the night, he stormed down to the front in nothing but his boxers and demanded a different room and never explained why. So I guess he got what he wanted. In the concert hall that Freeland Stanley built for his wife Flora, employees and guests can hear the faint piano music even though there isn't a piano in there anymore. In the basement of the concert hall, there are two ghosts, Paul and Lucy. They slam doors, turn lights on and off, and when you sing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, the ghost of Lucy gets mad and will scratch and push people. Well, I get that. Throughout the hotel, guests and employees feel dizzy. They feel cold spots. They feel like something or someone walks through them at times. Lots of orbs show up on cameras. Some even see Freeland and Flora Stanley on the staircase looking at their hotel and guests. Room 217, the most haunted room, is said to be Elizabeth, the old maid who survived the explosion. She's still there, but she doesn't like couples who stay the night who aren't married. Well, Elizabeth, you just gotta let that go, sweetie. Couples reported a cold force between them as they lay in bed. That's just marriage. No, just kidding. Their luggage gets packed up and put by the door as seemingly as if by itself, with weird noises happening throughout the night as well. So the Stanley Hotel definitely seems like the place we need to stay at when we go to Fort Collins, but we'll see. As you know, if you've listened to this show at all, I'm not a huge fan of getting scared. So, which made our television filming so very interesting. But there you go. We will have all that on our Halloween episode for our next episode coming up. I want to thank all our Patreons, especially our friend Brooks, for being so hands-on with his patronage in terms of helping us out. And really grateful for all of you who are helping us out. That includes Elise, Sharon, Dawn, Adam, Bryce, Sherry, Brooks, Marion, Kathleen, Alexa, Debbie, Jackie, Ruth, Mary Frances, Gina and Victoria, Sandy, Christopher, David, Ashley, Jeremiah, Elizabeth, BB Nix, Melinda, Jordan, Tammy, James, Taya, Evan, Arwen, Steve, Kyle and Charlotte, and Catherine. I want to thank you guys. Oh, and Mari. Sorry, Mari. I want to thank you guys so much for everything you do for us, everything in every way you support us. We are so, so grateful. And I do have, I was going to announce my first ever released music is going to be premiering on the Halloween episode, our next episode. There is a patron-only show called Ghost Stories We Have Heard. And for whatever reason, I have been getting back into music. Jason's been a huge supporter of that. He's like, he bought me a new guitar, and he like, whatever I needed, he's like, whatever you need, just get it, just get it. He was so excited that I was getting back into music. And so we'd been out all day, and I had this silly little tune playing through my head, and I just sat down at the computer and I recorded it. And with a guitar, I should have used a click track. I know that now, but I didn't. And I recorded it, and then I did harmony for it, and then another harmony for it, and then I did a third part harmony for it. And then we have a friend who is a listener of the show, Lou, and she plays bass. And she said, well, send me the song. I'll see what I can do with it. So she added bass. Her husband played an instrument on it as well, and they had a friend who played drums for it. So it actually came out pretty funny for such a goofy little tune. I'm actually really excited about it. So we're going to premiere that on the episode next week, and then the only place you'll be able to hear it is if you are a patron and you are receiving our every other week Ghost Stories We Have Heard episodes, because those are going to be what we do when it's an off week for the podcast. We do the Ghost Stories We Have Heard for patrons. So you'll get to hear, yeah, I don't know. It's so goofy, but it's fun. And I have to say, Lou and her husband made it so much better. So we'll talk a bit more about that next week. Otherwise, I want to say thanks to everybody who's been helping us out. Like I said, the patrons, people who've been sending in stories for the Halloween episode. It's not too late. Please send me your stories. We want listener stories. We have a few. I'd love some more. And we'll read them out. And we can either use your name or not. You can just have the private satisfaction of hearing your story read out and knowing that it's yours. Or you can say, no, go ahead, use my name and do it that way. So just take a minute. Dash it off in an email. Send it to us, ghostsnbears@gmail.com. That's all one word, ghostsnbears, the letter N, at gmail.com. Just send us the story. You can even voice dictate it into the email. I mean, do that. Whatever is the easiest for you. We would love to have it. And then we can share that story on the Halloween episode, which is going to be coming up. So we're excited for that. Otherwise, we have reached the end of our time together. I'm so grateful. I'm sorry Jason wasn't here. I know he's sorry he wasn't here. We were chatting about the episode and he was getting really excited about it. But you know what? His health is more important at this point. That's all I'm worried about. So we're going to make sure he's okay. And I have a turkey dinner to go and finish making. So I'm going to go do that. Because what do you do after you have a 5-hour car trip? You make a full turkey dinner because you're an idiot. That's how that works. Anyway, thanks for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, our very first there, but from there, not the in there kind of episode. Please let us know. Working on the sound quality, so you don't need to let me know that. I know it's terrible, and I am working on it. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. And I hope we get to see you soon, and hopefully we get to be in the place where you are. And if not, we get to talk to you from the place you are. And that's because we're the only podcast that gives you the actual ghost story with the actual history from the actual place. And hopefully one day soon, that place will be with you. Take care.